Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Lou Adler, and we're going to be talking about his view, which is about hiring with your head. So he's actually written a number of books about it. But before we get into that, Lou, where can people find you on social?
Well, the best way to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lou Adler, Facebook, or performancebasedhiring.com. You'll get me there, performancebasedhiring.com.
Performancebasedhiring.com. So
yeah, or you could look with your head and you'd still find me.
Yeah. So and I know that you're pretty busy on LinkedIn and from a social perspective. So Lou, you've written the book Hire with Your Head, which is you told me it's the 4th edition.
Well, the 4th edition, I just turned in the manuscript to John Wiley & Sons. The 4th edition will be published in September. That's the target date.
Okay, cool. So you've done it. So you've done 3 editions, and you've just got one coming out now in September.
Right, and actually, there's an edition between the 3rd and the 4th that's called The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. But Wiley didn't want to do it because I wanted to be both for candidates and hiring managers and recruiters, and they only wanted one audience. They wanted the hiring audience, not the candidate audience. So
right.
The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired is the most recent book, and it's very similar, but it's also has chapters devoted to candidates.
Okay, so from a candidate perspective, what should people be doing in terms of getting hired?
Well, if you ask me, the biggest question, this is where I felt, and if the 4th edition was the Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired, was difficult because it took 2 perspectives. It said, here's what hiring managers and interviewers should do.
Yeah.
But more likely than not, they won't do it. So here's what candidates can do to ensure that they're interviewed most accurately. And what I suggest to candidates is early in the interview, ask the interviewer, hey, can you tell me a few things about the job, how performance is going to be measured? Because I'd like to give you some examples of work that I've done that's most comparable. The idea is to ask the hiring manager to tell, hey, what's this job about? What are some of the performance metrics for the job? Let me give you some examples of work I've done that's most comparable. That will at least ensure you're being interviewed more accurately than if you just leave it up to the interviewer to determine if you're good or bad. And I guarantee everybody has their own pet peeves. You will not be interviewed accurately if you leave it up to the interviewer. It's random luck. So they judge you on your first impression and personality, not your ability to do the work.
So, I mean, one of the things that about getting a job is there's an expectation now that you would have looked at the website and therefore you will have, because you've done all those things, that you should have an understanding. But that's nothing related to the job, is it?
Well, that's a hypothesis you've assumed there. If you're a candidate who a recruiter has reached out to, which is termed passive candidate, I would look on a bunch of techniques to find candidates. You'd look for them and you'd reach out to that candidate and say, hey, would you be interested in this job, Tim? Well, you don't know anything about the job, so how would you know if you're interested or not? So there's a group of candidates that aren't going to do prep. On the other hand, candidates who apply to jobs, let's be real frank, when you apply to a job, there's 1,000 jobs just like that with the same title. So most often they just push the apply button. It's automatic. It's the biggest waste of time in the world. So they don't really know the job. They're not going to stay. They don't know who's going to call them back. So they can't study 500 applications. Oh, finally somebody's going to call me back. And you'll study it a little bit when you know you have an interview scheduled. And that's important to do, to prep a little bit so you can ask about the job. But you'll definitely be a step ahead if you do that kind of work for an interview. So that's a very good point.
Yeah. And then it's about when you're going for the interview is asking about the role. Is it about the measurement that you're asking about, or what sort of things data should be used?
I just say, hey Tim, tell me a little about the job.
Right.
What are some of the
straight open question?
What are some projects I'll work on? Yeah. So just get into a conversation. Hey, tell me a little about the work. What kind of projects will be assigned? What's some problems you're facing? What's the team like? Just ask logical questions that would give some insight about the job. Now, the hiring manager should know that, or the interviewer should know it. The recruiters know less about it, but that just shows a lot of confidence when you can ask those kinds of questions. Then you control the process of what you're being interviewed about. It's about that job. Oh, great, Tim. That sounds interesting. I have to design a new circuit to do A, B, and C. Let me give you an example of work I did over at XYZ company that relates to that. So now all of a sudden, you're controlling the interview about situations that actually determine your ability and competence through the work, and you're demonstrating confidence that you're not afraid to ask those kinds of questions. So a lot of things happen just by asking those questions.
So rather than have the classic in where you sit there and then someone asks you questions, what you do is you control it by actually going to them and saying, this is the answer, but also giving examples. Because the classic thing when you interview somebody is that you're trying to like pull out examples. It's like, well, can you give me an example of that? And they actually don't seem prepared to. Well, I'm not sure about that. So it is about going prepared with examples.
Absolutely. Well, here's what I tell candidates too. As I said, and if you go to this website, winwinhiring.com. No, is that it? Yeah, winwinhiring.com.
Yeah.
There's a course for how to get prepared for an interview for candidates. There's a modest charge, a cup of coffee charge. That's what I got to pay the person who owns the platform.
Right.
But it describes what you need to do. So it describes that technique. But another technique is the importance of answering questions in paragraphs as opposed to sentences and opposed to chapters. In a paragraph, and this is English, grammar school English, you have, and I call it the SAFW response, say a few words.
Right.
A good answer is about 1 minute to 2 minutes. You make an opening statement, that's the S. You amplify the statement. Give an example. I'm real strong at building teams and developing people. That was really something I did at my last job at XYZ company. Let me give you then, so that's the S and the A. Then the E is, or F is, give me a few examples, SAFW. Let me give you an example of what I mean. And then you give an example of that strength. And then you wrap it up. So as over my career, I've always felt that my real strength was helping develop people and coaching people through it. And I really enjoy that. That's called the SAFW response. If you only speak 30 seconds, you will not get the job. It's a waste of time. You're making the interviewer work too hard. If you talk for 3 minutes or more, people think you're boring and egocentric and you think you're the greatest, coolest thing in the world. You won't get the job either. But engaging in a conversation, using the SAFW response, having your weakness, your strengths prepared. That's why I tell candidates, write down your 5 or 6 strengths, and then prove it with some example. And then when you're asked, hey, tell me about what your strength is, you could say, oh, my real strength is architecting systems. Let me give you an example of what I've done. So those are the 2 types of preps that I would recommend.
So take me through. So SAFW is
say a few words. 1 minute to 2 minutes is ideal. More than 3 minutes, you talk too much. Nobody's listening. Less than 30 seconds, you got to work too hard. And interviewers, that goes back to the other point, Tim. Most interviewers aren't great at interviewing.
Yeah.
They don't really like it, hiring managers. So if they have to keep on working, tell me another thing, they don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
So don't make it that hard if you're a candidate to get your information out. That you're judged not only by the content of the answer, but the quality of how you phrase it. So the SAFW is how you talk to people in the normal conversation. So just learn that. And I think that's important technique. And that just says, this person's pretty interesting. They communicate well. And you've asked questions about real job needs. Well, if you don't get a job on that one, read the book again. Or you're being interviewed the wrong way.
Yeah, you're right there, Lou, which is that a lot of people, when I've interviewed candidates, but it's not something that I do every day, and therefore I would never. Maybe I'm just being too humble at saying that I'm not skilled in it, but I've been to interviews and you go and the person you kind of feel is going through the motions, even though I've been interviewed and I've won jobs, and you kind of feel that it's the other person who actually is struggling, not me.
Right. It happens all the time, and it's just human nature. Most managers don't interview too often.
Yes.
And they're and most companies are not required to interview. And even if they are required to interview, they don't ever really enjoy the training. They will take 1 or 2 days of training on how to interview, and they never use it. If they like somebody based on first impressions, they ask easy questions, they ignore negatives, and if they don't like you, they're going to prove you're incompetent.
Yeah.
It's going to happen all the time. So we spend a lot of time to try to get people and hiring managers to ask the right questions. So and that's what my company really does. We train recruiters and hiring managers on how to find people, how to interview people, and recruit people. That's what I do. But obviously, in that process, we deal. And I've been a recruiter for many, many years. So I've interviewed thousands, literally thousands, and 10, maybe more than 5,000 candidates. That's for sure.
Yeah. So is there any other techniques that people looking for jobs can do? So we obviously need to prep beforehand. But we also, you said you need to come up with your 5 strengths. And is that, when you say your 5 strengths, is that, and is that in that interview, you're going to try and explain those 5 strengths in that interview?
Well, that's actually a real good point, because in the interview, at the end, the purpose of the interview is to ensure you're being interviewed accurately.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to take control. So in some way, you're doing you have to be so good at explaining your stories and your strengths that you're not thinking about the stories and strengths. You're thinking about, is the interview actually covering all my strengths? So it's just like a salesperson. Okay, I'm selling you a product that has 7 features. You've only asked me about 2 features. You didn't ask me about my technical skills, my ability to collaborate, my work ethic. And so you might want at the end of the interview, hey, Tim, let's assume that your technical ability to architect systems is great, but it was never, and you realize that towards the end of the interview, that was never covered. And you just say something like this: Tim, I was reading the job description and it sounded like the part of this job has to architect system design. If that's true, can you tell me a little bit about it? Because that's really one of my core strengths. So again, that's leading the witness.
Yeah.
You force the interviewer to give you the question that you already know the answer to.
Yes.
Now, that takes a lot of prep.
Yes.
If you can actually feel confident to do that, you almost don't need to prep, because you're so good at it. But it really is important. The other point is, ask questions about that, but I want to tell people.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Lou.
Okay, so obviously you got to get the interview. And everyone gets so excited about getting the interview, they forget that they've got to control that interview properly. So what I suggest to people is, rather than applying for a job, the likelihood that you're going to get a job when you apply is less than 1%. The chance that you'll be interviewed is about 3%. I've talked to a lot of the applicant tracking systems. Now, this had to be, February last year, just before COVID pandemic hit. I was with a company. They advocated that they had, over the last 5 years, they had processed 60 million applications. 60 million applications. They're called applicant tracking systems. And they were very proud. He said, of that 60 million, 600,000 people got jobs. 600, that's 1%. 1%. Now, I've talked to other companies that do the same thing, and it's always 1%. Right. So the likelihood of getting a job by applying is 1%, 3%, you'll be interviewed. On the other hand, you go in and look at a company website of a job you want, rather than applying for the job. Okay, XYZ company is hiring system architects for civil engineering. Doesn't matter what it is. And you say, well, that's an interesting company. I've done work like that. Then you should do research about that and try to use the back door. Who do I know at that company? Can I get a referral at that company? Can I connect with someone on LinkedIn? So I'm looking for a marketing job. Well, the VP marketing of that company is there on LinkedIn. I can write a personal note to that person and say, hey, I understand you're hiring marketing analysts to do this kind of work. Well, at my last company, I did that kind of work. I'd love to chat with somebody about it. That will put you at least in the top half or the top quartile. It will increase your percentage from 1% to about 10%. If you know somebody to get interviewed, it will increase your odds of 30 to 50%. But just a weak connection will get you 10 times better response. A strong referral will get you 100. I mean, you'll be at the top of the list. Even if in alphabetical order, will put you there at the top of the list. But that one you can change your name if you want, but that's silly.
Yeah,
irrespective of that, those are things you have to do. Don't try to play the Monopoly game or the roulette game. It's not going to happen.
And I think that's really good advice, Lou, which is that to use your network and to use the tools available to us like LinkedIn as a way of approaching somebody. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the job, but at least it increases your chances that you may do.
Dramatically.
Yeah. And I think for me, I've had interns come to me and looking for jobs, and I pretty much nearly always interview them, because if someone's got the if someone actually has the I'm trying to the incentive to actually get off their backsides and actually do something, I respect them and I will give them an interview.
Right. I would say that little personal touch is critical, whether you're a hiring manager or a candidate looking for a job. I mean, imagine sending it to the VP marketing of a company. That takes a lot of guts to send it in a little summary of what you did, maybe a short SAFW. Hey, I know you're looking for people who do this. At my last job, here's a paragraph of something I did. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'll connect with this person and I'll forward it to the hiring manager who works in my department. Now all of a sudden you've just changed. Oh, the VP recommended I talk to this candidate. You're just in the game right away. I mean, so use the back door. And this is the thing about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, and this from a recruiter's perspective, most recruiters think it's a database of 700 million people. It's not. It's a network of 700 million people. So if you're a candidate, this company's hiring people. Well, who's a director here? Who's a VP here? Do I know anybody there? So all of a sudden you can just build, even those weak connections, you can start building the connections when you look at LinkedIn as a network of people, not just a database of people. And those are two fundamentally different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's critical. I mean, I'm a great believer that your net worth is your network. One of the things that people often forget is the fact that when they're looking for a job is actually to connect to people on LinkedIn. They think what we're going to do is I'm going to put up a CV. I've just been talking to somebody and all they've done is they put the keywords that they're hoping that a recruiter's going to find them. Right. And it's like, okay.
Well, that's right. The chance of getting an interview is 1 in 100. I mean, 3 in 100, and getting the job is 1 in 100. So it's pretty bad odds to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, hope's never been a strategy. So wind back. The question I was going to ask you was, what prep should I be doing as a candidate? Should I actually be looking up? Should I be looking the hiring manager up on LinkedIn?
If you can find the hiring manager, that's pretty hard to find because you don't know what department it is. Big company, small company, relatively easy. But even a small company, I would go one level above. Like if you're a manager looking for a job, the hiring manager would be a director. I would still go to the VP. But if you're looking for a staff position, then your boss is going to be a hiring manager. I would look for a director, someone who's managing managers. If you one level up, because then if you can get the referral from the boss's boss, your hiring manager's boss, all of a sudden you've just put yourself at the top of the list. Yeah. Because now they have an obligation. My boss's boss asked me to, or my boss asked me to do this. I got to talk to the candidate. I mean, so that's just human nature too. So certainly prepping to get a job is one thing, but when you're in the interview, make sure you ace it. And that's why I say, if you go to that little class, how to prep for an interview, again, it's $5. That's what I had to charge.
Winwinhiring.com.
Yeah, and you might have to put the www in front of it because somehow it doesn't always go there. But the website is winwinhiring.com, and it's a class on how to prep for an interview, and it's invaluable. Or you can buy the book. I make 37 cents per book, so it's not what I call big books here.
Yeah, I know. I make something similar on my books. So yeah.
Yeah, right.
We're never going to get rich.
Big author. You get 48 cents. I get 37 cents. So yeah, big difference there.
Cool. And so what in terms of remind us again what document or book that the people need to be looking for right now?
Well, you could look up Lou Adler, Hire With Your Head. You could look up Lou Adler, Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired. But the thing that if I was going to give advice to hiring managers, recruiters, and candidates alike is it's what people do with what they have that makes them successful, not what they have. So when I take a search assignment, I always ask the hiring manager when he gives me a job description listing skills, experiences, and competencies, I say, this is not a job description. This is a person description. Let's put this aside. What does the person need to do to be successful? And usually the hiring manager will define the job. Well, is a series of performance objectives. That opens the pool to more diverse candidates, more high potential candidates, more non-traditional candidates, all these things that don't matter. If the person can do the job, he or she should demonstrate and prove it. And if you can, that's where a candidate has to force hiring managers by asking the same question: what does the person in this job need to do to be successful? I'd like to give you some examples of work that I've done that are most comparable. Now, that approach won't help you get a job you don't deserve, but it will help you get one you do deserve. Right.
Fantastic. Lou, thank you so much for today and your insight. I mean, your track record and the number of people that you've interviewed, I mean, you know this stuff. So I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody today. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Hopefully it was helpful. I'd love to hear everyone's stories. Thanks.
Very much. And so remind people, so you're Lou Adler on LinkedIn. Remind people your company website again.
Performancebasedhiring.com is the best one to find. Performancebasedhiring.com.
Performancebasedhiring.com.
But you can Google me. I'm around. I'm trying to hide, but I can't. So you'll find me if you really want to reach me. If you can't find me, you don't deserve to find me.
You're not looking hard enough. Yeah.
All right.
Lou,
thanks, Tim.
Thanks so much for today. Appreciate it.